Alistair, manager of St Vincent's Proprietary Limited, 1700 hectare property at Sellicks Hill, South Australia. We run about 5,000 breeding ewes, 1,500 ewe lambs and 250 breeding Angus cows. We started basically cost of production, so we could buy in chicken manure at a lower cost of phosphorus than single super, and we had the added benefit of nitrogen as well at the same time, and all the trace elements. Considering regenerative farming practices on the farm, multi-species pastures, cover cropping, rotational grazing, reduced paddock size to increase stocking density in the rotations, fencing off watercourses, reduced chemical inputs and no synthetic fertiliser inputs. Challenges getting into regen ag is advice and confidence to adopt these practices when it's still seen as something alternative, when I think it eventually will become mainstream, but especially 12 years ago it was very alternative. The biggest regen ag successes has been reduced cost of production and less reliance on outside inputs. So we're now making our own compost, so we don't have a fertiliser bill except the cost of spreading. Diversity in our pastures, biodiversity coming in, and shelter and stock health have all been really beneficial. Stock health has changed, but it's very hard to measure. They just appear in a healthier state with less reliance on drenches. We've got dung beetles working, so that helps reduce worm burdens, especially in our cattle, so which goes along the lines of helping reduce cost of production. We've introduced dung beetles, but by having a regenerative farming system where we're not using the chemicals for drenching or synthetic fertilisers, we seem to be building up populations naturally that are local and now introduced. Next steps and future plans for the property is more of the same, and probably more intensely managed multi-species pastures, diversity, more paddock trees, more subdivision, look at more diverse grazing management practices, whether we introduce chickens. Subdivision is probably when I took over 12 years ago, paddock sizes would have been 25, 30 hectares, and now my goal is to get it down to an average size of 10 hectares, and once I get there we'll take it another step and get them down to 5 hectares. That's an ideal world, but topography on the property is a challenge, so working through that. Always going to be happening that will continually develop the property further. Part of the multi-species pastures we're putting in, whether they're annual or perennials, is the tillage radish, which this is 6 months old, dry sown in spring and has grown through summer to this stage, which has been fantastic for soil health and then stock health when they get a chance to graze it. It does work, it's just having faith in the system that multi-species can work. With the health of the soil, we're now getting root exudates onto the roots, which is building soil, and so we're starting to see the roots in our plants having sort of the dreadlock look of healthy plants. These pastures and crops have not had any insecticide sprays on them or any artificial fertilisers. We don't have a bug problem. We do, well, except some, but not all the plants, and the cattle will come in the next couple of weeks and clean anything else up. So we're getting a really good biodiversity happening. The whole paddock was covered in a web of spider webs. It looked like silk all over the paddock this morning at sunrise, and so happy soils. Fundamental principles for the property is to be productive and leaving it in a better state than when I took over. Most of the property's been in the family since 1902. So this is the first gully in 2007 from when I took over that we revegetated. It was an erosion gully which has now settled down, creating a lot of shelter for the stock and biodiversity with birds and wildlife. It was used for paddock subdivisions. It was a logical area to fence off and help make the adjoining paddock smaller. The benefits has been improved grazing management. We haven't lost any production, we've actually increased production. Insect control is by the birds that live in this shelter belt and watercourse, and water filtration with the water coming out in winter a lot cleaner than it used to be. So my goal is to fence off all watercourses. Included in that would be up to 20% of the property and with no expected reduction in stocking rates. The tillage radish, the brassicas, the plantain, chicory, grasses, the sorghum's flowering, some new clovers coming through, and no bugs, no pests. The cows will come in the next couple of weeks once it's established a bit further, and then they'll rotate in and out over a period of months. The chicory will persist, the brassicas will persist for another 18 months. Sorghum will be finished, they'll get grazed once and they'll be finished. Clover will help thicken it up, same with the ryegrasses. These are a paddock tree project we've been doing with the Hills and Fleurieu Landscape Board. These were planted 3 years ago as part of a demonstration and a trial to prove that the guards would work and hold up against cattle. And I can definitely say they do work, cattle in here. And these guards will stay on until the trees are established enough that they'll be fine with cattle rubbing against them. This summer fodder crop was established with no chemicals, no fertilisers. We grazed it hard with a mob of ewes for a fortnight before seeding it in September 2021, and then sowing it with a double disc seeder, and then also leaving the ewes in there for another 2 days after seeding to walk the seed in and reduce the competition from the pasture getting going and out competing the fodder crop. This tree plantation or shelter belt or watercourse fencing and treeing was done 10 years ago, 8 to 10 years ago I think it was. Established quite well, quite sparse, but it's also letting the trees get to their natural shape without the competition. There is a dam up there somewhere, but you can't see it because of all the trees, which is great. The native wildlife have water access. Fencing is done where it's accessible, not really close. We keep it nice and wide because we don't feel we're losing any grazing, which works quite well. Just done a first round of a bird survey. We've had 48 species of birds seen in January, February. We'll do another one in the next month or two. We'll do 4 over a 12-month period just to get all the migratory birds that come through. We've got more kangaroos on the property. We've got some antechinus marsupials on the property now. I haven't seen anything else yet, but with time we might have some of the bandicoots and other things like that. The uniqueness of this property is location and scale. So location close to Adelaide and going from the coast inland gives us a wide variety of soil types and climate, and the scale, just the size of it for this area, is quite unique as well. Out the back of the property we've got another shelter belt here. We've got contractors spreading compost. There's cattle in this paddock so we can still spread because it's a natural product, and the dung beetles are very active at this time of the year, so these are just a couple of collected just then. So this is a compost we've made on farm with the use of waste grape mark, olive pomace, sheep and cow manure from the sheep and cattle yards and the confinement yards that we use for the sheep, all mixed together and composted for 6 to 12 months and then spread out in the paddocks.